Right, so whilst nuclear weapons are certainly big news right now as Putin waters down the threshold for their use as far as Russia's concerned, and Joe Biden and Keir Starmer seemingly engage in a willy-waving contest over who is most prepared to press the big red button on all of mutually assured destruction, it is Iran, to no news outlet's fanfare in the West whatsoever, as I'm sure comes as no surprise to you at all, where cooler heads appear to be prevailing on such matters, and where the grown-ups are actually in the room. Because where those same windmilling Western politicians gyrate themselves towards all of our oblivion over in the Middle East, Iran are talking of the urgent need to ensure the Middle East is a weapons of mass destruction free zone, where nobody has such things, and who is actually the only Middle Eastern nation that allegedly has them and has them without any oversight whatsoever? I'm sure you don't need 3 guesses to work that one out. Right, so while the US has assented to the use of their long-range missiles into Russian territory, having handed Ukraine their so-called ATACMS missiles, ATACMS as they are often referred to, oh, the hilarity and wit that comes out of those naming weapons of death and destruction, hee, I'm sure they all had quite the jolly jape over it. Though sadly it isn't one of those only in America moments, as Germany and the UK and the EU all mull handing such long-range devices as they have to Ukraine as well, to do the same thing, the US leading all of them on foreign policy, and all of it too little, too late. Genocide Joe arguably acting to do this now simply to make it harder for Donald Trump to end it, as has been his narrative of late, though what he says and what he does may well be 2 different things. Breaking news also has it that the UK has actually assented to the use of their Storm Shadow missiles being used in Russia by Ukraine, and apparently that has now already happened, so, well, we're all waiting to see what that means for us here in the UK now. But all in all, for the sake of keeping warfare going, Biden and others have pushed us all closer to mutually assured destruction. The narrative now turning to one of nuclear weaponry as Russia apparently lowers its threshold by which it would consider their use. And of course, the West sees that as an act of aggression against them. But it's not to events in Russia and Ukraine that I'm turning to here. I've covered NATO's eastward expansionism and the threat Russia considers of that previously, the part of the story that never gets told so much when we look at the Russia and Ukraine situation, because that ramped matters up to where we are today in no uncertain terms, and no insignificant part, where the so-called leaders of the free world consider wiping the world out should any of them be stupid enough to ever launch one of these massively destructive, completely pointless nuclear devices. And if you think like me on this front regarding nuclear weapons, then it is something we do appear to actually share with Iran as well, who have a fatwa in place regarding nuclear weapons, all despite the claims by those same willy-wavers right now that they are evil and they are bound to be developing them, even as Iran opens itself up to the UN to potentially see its nuclear work, which they have always claimed is towards nuclear energy and nuclear power, to safeguarding and checks and showing itself to be an open and transparent state on these matters at least. Compared to those in the West running around talking up nuclear warfare, though, that's not a high bar, I will admit, but equally I doubt you'll have heard anything about this story and what essentially is a clever diplomatic attack on Israel by Iran, along with those propping Israel up, also happening to be the same people largely propping Ukraine up, no coincidence, siding with the oppressed in one instance and the oppressor in the other. The world can see the hypocrisy, and you're winning no brownie points because of it. If the USA were winning some brownie points, Donald Trump wouldn't be about to re-enter the White House, would he? Yet still nobody in the West appears to be learning from that. Enough of them, though. What is Iran up to then, Damo? Well, this move by Iran has come out of the 5th session of the Conference on the Establishment of a Middle East Zone Free of Nuclear Weapons and Other Weapons of Mass Destruction. It's not a catchy title for a conference, guys, though there is certainly no mistaking it for what it actually intends. This was held on Monday. It is a United Nations conference, and these comments have therefore come from Iran's permanent representative to the UN, Amir Saeed Iravani, who has been quoted as saying, "The current global landscape, particularly the genocidal war of the Israeli regime in Gaza over the past year and its blatant aggression against other regional countries, underscores the urgent need to establish a Middle East free from all WMDs. The rationale for creating a WMD-free zone in the region has never been more relevant and pressing." Very hard to disagree with that statement. We've all seen what Israel has been doing for the last year, certainly after all, not just in Gaza, but other regional nations too, Iraq, Iran, Yemen, Syria, the West Bank as well as Gaza. Though of course their aggression goes back long before that in the occupied Palestinian territories, goes back so far that you'll perhaps be even more surprised to learn that this idea of a WMD-free zone in the Middle East has been an idea floated and opposed by Israel since 1974, and it was put forward by Iran then as well. Their opposition to nuclear weapons seemingly goes back decades, despite Western rhetoric saying Iran are building them, which I found rather surprising, since they've been through a theocratic coup since then. Everything changed. But the opposition to nuclear weaponry seemingly hasn't. It shows us that opposition to WMDs isn't even anything new. And actually it casts a whole new light over Iraq and the alleged WMDs they had, or claimed that they had, under Saddam Hussein, I thought anyway, which saw Blair and Bush go to war there, of course finding no WMDs at all as they did when all was said and done. But a million dead Iraqis later, neither of them has ever been dragged to The Hague to face charges over that. More is the pity. Now, with Israel having historically opposed this notion of doing away with WMDs in the Middle East, do Israel actually have any? The claim has been for a long time that they do, and indeed the International Campaign Against Nuclear Weapons, ICAN, list Israel as one of the 9 nations who possess nuclear weapons, though admits that where it, along with North Korea, are concerned, quite the pairing they make, don't they? The number of warheads in their possession is unknown, and there are only estimates as to the amount of fissile material both have with regards to how many more they could make. Now, with Israel being Western-backed and protected as it is, ostensibly an interest or an extension of Western interests in the Middle East, the only reason the US is so bloody protective of it, in all honesty, all despite their conduct, you'd imagine someone somewhere in the West knows what Israel has got. But astonishingly, the lengths some will apparently go to excuse Israel of any fault, blame, or responsibility means that there is actually absolutely no oversight over what they may or may not have in their possession by way of nuclear armaments. And Iran hit the nail on the head and flipped the table on those pointing to Iran and wanting to know what their nuclear capabilities are by turning that very sobering fact back on said nations at the UN at this rather wordily titled conference. Iravani's speech is being covered by 2 Persian outlets, Press TV, which is the state TV channel of the Iranian regime, the Shia Muslim theocracy which runs the country, and is certainly the best known Iranian outlet. But there's another which replicated the speech in full, if you care to check the article out, Noor News, which is a Sunni Muslim news outlet that produces Persian language coverage. They're based in Dubai, however. But it does all show how difficult it can be to get adequate coverage of Iranian news outside of Iran too, and independent of Iran at that. However, Noor News is a good pick, and you can read it in English too. So here's an excerpt of their coverage of Iravani's speech, laying into Israel over the matter of WMDs, in an article titled, Israeli Aggression Stresses Need for Creating WMD Zone Free. And it really is the kind of messaging you wish was coming from Western leaders too. Addressing the conference, Iravani said, "It is deeply regrettable that for decades there has persisted an illegitimate opposition by the Israeli regime against the ongoing international appeals to establish a zone free of WMDs, a proposal put forward by Iran in 1974. By politicizing this initiative, the Israeli regime seeks to conceal the true reason behind its opposition to the establishment of a Middle East free of WMDs, which is to safeguard its own WMD program by remaining free of any legally binding commitments. The Israeli regime's actions, including acts of terrorism and sabotage, targeting civilian nuclear programs and scientists in the region, as well as its Prime Minister's call for a credible nuclear threat against Iran during the 78th UN General Assembly session on September 22, 2023, and an Israeli minister's proposal to use nuclear weapons in the Gaza Strip, demand immediate intervention by international bodies such as the UN Security Council and the IAEA. We categorically condemn these illegal and irresponsible actions, emphasizing the danger posed by WMDs in the hands of such an illegitimate regime. These actions underscore the urgent need for a zone free of WMDs in the region as a critical step to address the Israeli regime's WMD capabilities and rid the region of these menacing weapons." Of course, the logical conclusion that should be drawn here is that any inspection or safeguarding of nuclear facilities, be they weapons manufacture or energy production, should be open and transparent with the UN, and where those demands have been levied for years on Iran, not least yet again right now, Israel gets treated again as an exception, and that is incredibly dangerous. As much as Iran seems to be doing the right thing here right now in making itself more open, protecting itself, safeguarding its citizens against Western hypocritical accusation as it is also doing, it exposes all the more the fact Israel isn't being put under that same pressure, held accountable in the same way at all in return. Naturally, you aren't being told about this news at all because you might think better of Iran and worse of Israel. Well, can we think worse of Israel much more right now, frankly? Or is it just as is actually more likely, in my view, just further appeasement of pro-Zionist influences? Form your own conclusions by all means. Either way, this is yet more evidence that Iran are not pro-nuclear weapons, actually have not been in decades, but that is simply not useful to Western leaderships who prefer to have Iran painted as a bogeyman to excuse Israel, who actually are. For more on Iran's openness with the UN, if this has come as a surprise to you, it really has been in my view, and it exercise in diplomatically wrong-footing Israel time after time. But equally, the signs are there. This is literally nothing for Iran to hide as far as nuclear enrichment purposes go. And so if they've got nothing to hide, it works in their favour to make that offer to the UN that they basically cannot refuse. An offer they can't refuse? Well, get all the details of that story in this video recommendation here as your suggested next watch, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.